In theatres, Karloff took part in another unholy trio.
True terror is the soft, cold caress of the raven's wing.
In The Raven and The Comedy of Terrors, a pair of fiendishly funny comedies, co-starring Vincent Price and Peter Lorre, Boris was once more sending up his screen image. But in Black Sabbath, he proved that he could still be genuinely scary in the first vampire role of his career.
I am hungry.
What the Beatles were to music, Boris was to monsters. There were puppet Borises, robot Borises, even Borises in drag when he guest starred on television in The Girl from U.N.C.L.E. as the murderous Mother Muffin.
I called him and told him, what does he think of doing a woman? He thought it was ripping. He thought that would be jolly. And in the makeup chair, looking in the mirror, all dressed up with the rig on, he said, I look like a $2 whore. And everybody, of course, broke up.
Boris's sense of humour was also recognised by the advertising world, and he was used to sell everything from sauce to cigarette lighters.
If your lighter can't do half the things the Ronson Comet can, get one and have your own torture test.
In 1967, Boris gave one of the best-known and best-loved performances of his career as the voice of the Grinch Who Stole Christmas.
Then he growled with his Grinch fingers, nervously drumming. I must find some way to keep Christmas from coming.
Based on the book by Dr. Seuss and adapted by animator and director Chuck Jones, The Grinch Who Stole Christmas became an instant classic and earned Boris Karloff a Grammy for his recording of the soundtrack album.
He said, if I should win, why don't you accept the prize, put it on your desk, and keep it for me. I did. Boris finally came to the office, and I said, there it is, Boris, pointing to it. There's the Grammy. And he said, it looks like a doorstop. And with that, he picked it up, opened my office door into the reception room, left it open, and put it on the floor as a doorstop. It stayed there for a long, long time, because I'm sentimental when it comes to people like Boris.
Unknown to his fans, Boris was in constant pain. He suffered from emphysema and crippling arthritis. His friends urged him to retire, but for Boris, retirement was out of the question.
The last 10 years of his life, his health was terrible, just terrible. And he would be on the set in a wheelchair, he'd have an oxygen tank nearby. He was a real trooper, he really was.
Although happy with his screen image and enjoying his private life, Boris Karloff hoped for one more chance to prove to the world that he was more than just a screen monster. But even he was surprised when the chance finally came.
My God, Jenny!
Targets, a powerful story of contemporary violence, starred Karloff as a fading horror actor targeted by a random killer.
He did work with us quite a bit on it because it was written for him. I think he just recognized what he could bring to it, crossing the line between who he was and what people believed he was.
The part is you.
Sammy, you're a sweet boy, but you can't possibly understand what it feels like to be me. I'm an antique, out of date.
Since this character is very much like me, he says, do I have to say such terrible things about myself? I said, my feeling, Boris, is that the more terrible things you say about yourself, the more the audience will say, no, it's not true, we don't agree. He said, well, I hope so. He said, they might just agree, he said.
Oh, Sammy, what's the use? Mr. Boogeyman, King of Blood, they used to call me. Marx Brothers make you laugh, Garbo makes you weep, Orlock makes you scream.
My father is essentially playing himself, and my father felt that the horror was happening on the streets, not up on the screen, that the way man was treating man was the real horror of today's world, and that really is what that film was all about.
Targets was a personal and professional triumph for Karloff, and he considered it to be his final film, although he continued to work for another year after completing it.
He never considered retiring or quitting. He just wanted to work. It's what he did, it's what he loved to do. And he did it almost until the day he died.
After a television appearance in 1968, Boris returned to London, but he was soon in hospital with a chest infection.
He was fading fast, and I dreamed up one of my typical agent-type lies. I told him how I had this picture in the work for him, and he was going to put on the harness again and go to work. Made him feel good. I wanted him to go out on top.
The 81-year-old actor, who had appeared in more than 200 stage, film and television roles, died on February the 2nd, 1969. But for the countless fans who mourned him around the world, Boris Karloff will never die. He is still remembered as generation after generation rediscovers the legacy of the man and his films.
The devotion that people still have to my father's memory, they're just incredible.
A series of public appearances by Boris's daughter Sarah helps to keep the Karloff name alive. With her are the families of two of her father's most famous co-stars, Bela Lugosi and Lon Chaney.
Bela Jr. and Ron Chaney and I go to conventions and meet people and shake hands and sign autographs. The fans are anxious to tell things that they wish they'd had an opportunity to tell my father, and they are delighted to be able to tell someone close to my father. Some of them are grown people, and some are still youngsters who are becoming familiar with my father's works. Do you know who that is? Who?
Frankenstein.
Right. Would you believe that was my father? You'd believe it? We made a trip recently to Florida, to Universal Studios, and we did some PR work for them.
Your big smile, buddy.
It's great to see my father's face. He was all over the place. Daddy. He was on caps and T-shirts and masks and the videos. No one would be more amazed than my father at his continuing fame and popularity and the intense endearment with which he is regarded by his fans and by the people who knew him.
It was only when I met him and then worked with him I realized how much more there was to it than just those monster creatures that he had been identified with so strongly.
He could have worked in any kind of picture, and he would still have been an excellent actor.
He was kind of a genie out of Aladdin's lamp to me, a magic man.
When I think about Boris, the main thing that I think of is a kind of dignity and warmth that he projected.
He was such an elegant man. He took everything with such patience.
The kindest and dearest man I've ever known. A really lovely human being.
A gentleman, a real gentle man.
There's a commemorative plaque that was placed after Boris's death at St. Paul's Covent Garden in London, known as the Actors' Church. And the lines were, "He nothing common did or mean upon that memorable scene." That sums up Boris Karloff.